You know what's interesting? Most women spend their entire lives trying to blend in, trying to be agreeable, predictable, easy to handle. But you've never been that woman. And whether you realize it or not, that difference, that quiet, effortless difference, is the very thing that shakes him in ways he will never admit out loud. Because the truth is, you carry something he doesn't come across often. It's not arrogance. It's not attitude. It's not a need to prove anything. It's the way you walk into a room like you belong there, without forcing yourself to shrink so others can feel bigger. And that energy, it disrupts the pattern he's used to. Most people move through relationships looking for comfort, for familiarity, for something predictable. But you're not predictable. You're consistently authentic. You don't perform. You don't chase. You don't mold yourself into the softer, quieter version of who you think someone wants. You simply stand in your truth, and people feel it before you even say a word. And that's where his fear begins. Because when a woman isn't motivated by approval, control becomes impossible. When a woman knows her worth, manipulation loses its power. When a woman doesn't tolerate inconsistency, excuses fall apart. And when a woman brings both softness and standards, she becomes unforgettable and unreplaceable. You're not like other women, not because you're trying to be different, but because you refuse to be anything other than yourself. And that authentic energy forces him to face parts of himself he usually avoids: his insecurities, his uncertainty, and his fear of not being enough. So let's talk about why your presence doesn't just attract him. It terrifies him in the way that only a powerful woman can. From the moment you enter someone's life, there's something about your presence that feels different. It's not loud, it's not showy, and it's never forced. It's the kind of energy that doesn't have to announce itself, because it naturally reshapes the space it enters. People may not know what to call it at first, but they feel it, and he certainly does. That's why you linger in his mind long after the conversation ends, long after you've walked away, long after he's tried convincing himself that you're just like everyone else. The truth is, the energy that makes you stand out begins with the way you carry yourself. You're grounded, you're centered, you don't rush to fill silence or prove your value, because you already understand it. When you speak, you choose your words deliberately. When you listen, you're fully present. And when someone tries to test your boundaries, you don't hesitate to reinforce them. That level of self-respect radiates more power than any dramatic gesture ever could. What really sets you apart is that you live in alignment. Your intentions match your actions. Your emotions match your truth. You don't pretend to be unbothered, but you don't let your feelings control you. You don't pretend to be unavailable, but you don't give your time to anything that drains your spirit. This balance, this harmony between softness and strength, is rare. And men who aren't used to that kind of authenticity don't know what to do with it. He notices the way you can be compassionate without being naive, the way you can be nurturing without losing yourself, the way you can care deeply, but still walk away when something no longer honors your self-worth. That combination confuses people who expect affection to come with desperation or loyalty to come with self-sacrifice. What intimidates him isn't your confidence, it's your clarity. You see through behavior, through inconsistencies, through emotional immaturity. You don't cling to potential, you respond to actions. You don't chase, you observe. You don't beg, you choose. And that level of discernment makes him feel exposed in ways he didn't anticipate. What you have is a kind of internal glow, not the kind that fades or needs validation to stay lit, but the kind that comes from knowing exactly who you are. That's why you stand out. Not because you're trying, but because everything about you is rooted in truth, depth, and self-possession. And that's the kind of energy that stays with a man, whether he's ready for it or not. There's a reason certain men become intimidated when they meet a woman like you. And it has far less to do with you being too much, and far more to do with what your presence exposes in them. Intimidation isn't about fear of you. It's about fear of what they feel they might fail to be in front of you. When a man meets a woman grounded in her value, it disrupts the comfortable illusions he's built about himself. Suddenly, charm isn't enough. Mixed signals don't work. Half effort is obvious, and emotional immaturity becomes impossible to hide. Most men are used to relationships where they can operate on autopilot. They expect their patterns to go unnoticed. They assume their inconsistencies will be tolerated. They believe the facade they've carefully crafted will hold up. But your intuition doesn't let it. You see the truth behind the behavior, and that alone can be deeply unsettling for someone who's never been held to that level of emotional visibility. Intimidation often starts the moment he realizes you don't need him, you choose him, and choice feels far more vulnerable than obligation. When a man senses that you're perfectly capable of walking away if something feels off, he becomes hyper-aware of his own flaws. The fear isn't losing you. The fear is being revealed as someone who isn't ready for a woman who's done her work. Your emotional intelligence poses another challenge. You communicate clearly. You don't weaponize silence or hide behind games. You express your needs without apology. That level of honesty demands reciprocity. And for a man who has spent years avoiding emotional depth, it feels like stepping into bright light after living in a dim room, uncomfortable, exposing, and impossible to ignore. What intimidates him most is that he instinctively knows he can't win you with superficial effort. He senses that the only way to keep you is to evolve, and evolution requires accountability. That's where the real fear lies. Because being with a woman like you doesn't just invite growth, it demands it. And not every man is ready to meet the version of himself that you naturally bring out. One of the clearest signs that a man is intimidated by you is when his behavior becomes inconsistent, not because he's confused about his feelings, but because he's scared of losing control over the situation. Control gives him safety. Predictability gives him comfort. But you, your presence, your standards, your independence, interrupt that safety in ways he didn't anticipate. So his reactions start to shift in subtle but telling ways. You'll notice it first in how he pulls back right after moments of closeness. One day he's open, engaging, leaning in, and the next he's suddenly distant or distracted. That retreat isn't about lack of interest, it's about emotional self-protection. Getting close to you makes him feel vulnerable, and vulnerability threatens the sense of control he's always relied on. Another sign shows up in the way he becomes overly analytical about your actions. Instead of simply enjoying the connection, he starts questioning why you said something, why you didn't text at a certain time, why you seem so composed. It's not jealousy, it's anxiety. He's trying to predict you, because unpredictability makes him feel exposed. You aren't unpredictable in a chaotic way. You're unpredictable because you operate from emotional stability, not patterns of fear, and that throws him off. There's also the subtle shift in his tone when things are going well. You might notice he becomes slightly defensive, almost as if he's preparing for rejection that hasn't happened. He may act like he doesn't care as much as he actually does, trying to keep you at an emotional arm's length, so he doesn't feel like he's giving you power over him. Men who fear losing control will pretend they're indifferent even when they're deeply invested. You might also see him testing you, pushing small boundaries, withdrawing briefly, or acting less interested, to see how you respond. It's not intentional manipulation, it's a fear-based reflex. He's checking if you'll chase, because if you do, he regains control of the emotional dynamic. When you don't chase, when you remain calm and self-assured, it rattles him even more. And then there's the lingering eye contact, the hesitation before speaking, the subtle tension in his body when you call something out with clarity. Those moments tell you everything. He's not scared of you. He's scared of the way you make him confront parts of himself he can't control. What he fears most isn't losing you. It's losing the version of himself he feels safe being. When a man genuinely likes you but starts to pull away, it's rarely because his feelings have faded. In fact, the pullback often happens precisely because those feelings are getting stronger, stronger than he expected, stronger than he can comfortably manage, and stronger than he knows how to express. Men who aren't used to deep emotional connection experience intensity as pressure, even when you're not demanding anything from them. Your presence alone awakens something in him that feels both exciting and unsettling. You'll notice the shift begins right after a moment where the connection felt undeniably real, maybe a vulnerable conversation, a shared laugh, or a moment where he felt truly seen. Instead of leaning into that closeness, he withdraws, not because he didn't enjoy it, but because he did. And that level of emotional exposure can feel like stepping into unfamiliar territory without a map. He might turn colder in his messages, or take longer to reply, not to punish you, but to regain emotional balance. Men often try to control their own vulnerability by creating distance. When he likes you deeply, he becomes acutely aware of how much he could lose. That awareness makes him cautious. He may worry that if he opens up too much, too fast, he'll lose his sense of independence, or fall into a dynamic he doesn't feel prepared for. For some men, pulling away is a way of testing themselves rather than testing you. He may be asking himself, am I ready for this? Can I handle someone like her? What if I mess this up? These questions create internal conflict, and the easiest way to quiet that conflict, at least temporarily, is to retreat. You might notice he becomes more reserved in his compliments, or stops sharing small details about his day. He's trying to slow down the connection to a pace that feels less threatening, even if it means confusing you in the process. But behind that distance, he still pays attention. He still remembers what you said. He still notices your tone, your silence, your presence. The pullback isn't a sign that he doesn't care. It's a sign that he cares more than he's ready to handle. When a man truly likes a woman who can see him, understand him, and meet him emotionally, he fears losing the image of control he's held onto for so long. And sometimes stepping back is the only way he knows how to catch his breath before he steps forward again. What many men don't expect is that your boundaries aren't meant to challenge them. They're meant to protect your peace. But for a man who hasn't done the inner work, those boundaries can feel like a direct hit to his ego. Not because you're being harsh, and not because you're shutting him out, but because your ability to say no, to set limits, and to reinforce your standards, forces him to confront the parts of himself he usually avoids. Boundaries reveal truth, and truth is uncomfortable for someone who's used to navigating relationships on his own terms. The moment he realizes you won't tolerate inconsistency, something shifts inside him. He becomes aware that he can't rely on charm, excuses, or temporary effort to stay in your life. He sees that you pay attention, not to words, but to patterns. And that awareness alone can make him defensive. When he's accustomed to women bending, compromising too early, or accepting crumbs, your refusal to lower your standards feels like rejection. But it's not rejection, it's clarity. And clarity feels threatening to an unhealed ego. You may notice that he sometimes reacts to your boundaries with irritation, silence, or withdrawal. That isn't because your limits are unreasonable, it's because your limits highlight the ways he isn't used to being held accountable. Accountability demands maturity, it demands reflection, and it demands that he step into a version of himself that isn't driven by impulse or convenience. That's a lot for someone who's never had to face it before. Your boundaries also remove his sense of control. When you calmly communicate what you will and won't accept, you take away the ability for confusion to exist. He can't keep you guessing. He can't manipulate with mixed signals. He can't rely on emotional ambiguity. Everything becomes clear, and clarity forces him to choose level up or step back. Another thing that triggers his ego is how effortlessly you stick to your standards. You don't waver. You don't second guess yourself. You don't fall apart when he tests a limit. You simply stay rooted in who you are. That steadiness exposes the instability in him. It shows him that strength doesn't have to roar. Sometimes it simply stands firm. Ultimately, your boundaries don't push him away. They push him inward. And while that journey is necessary, it's one not every man is prepared to take. But the ones who are, those are the ones who will meet you at your level, not resent you for having one. What truly sets you apart are the qualities you embody so naturally, qualities that many men simply aren't accustomed to encountering in one woman. It's not that these traits don't exist in others, but the combination of them within you creates a presence that feels rare, almost disarming. Men may not immediately understand why they're drawn to you, but they feel the difference. And that difference lingers long after the conversation ends. One of the first things he notices is your emotional maturity. You communicate with clarity, not games. You express your feelings without using them as weapons. You take accountability instead of shifting blame. That level of honesty is refreshing, but it's also unfamiliar. Many men navigate relationships through assumptions and avoidance, not open dialogue. Your transparency challenges that rhythm in the best but most unsettling way. Then there's your independence. Not the performative I don't need anyone version, but the grounded, self-sustaining kind that comes from knowing who you are. You don't attach your worth to a man's attention, and you don't collapse when someone disappoints you. You hold your own. That strength, wrapped in softness instead of hardness, is something most men rarely see. It's powerful without being aggressive. It's self-assured without being detached. He also sees the depth of your compassion. You care deeply but not blindly. You empathize without losing yourself. You give without sacrificing your dignity. This balance is rare. Most people lean too far into one side. Either they become overly accommodating or emotionally closed off. You've found a middle ground that feels safe, authentic, and inspiring. Another trait that catches him off guard is your discernment. You don't fall for potential. You pay attention to consistency. You don't get lost in fantasies. You read reality. You don't ignore red flags. You name them. This inner clarity prevents him from hiding behind charm, excuses, or polished masks. He feels seen, not in a superficial way, but in a way that touches the parts of himself he usually keeps protected. And perhaps the rarest trait of all is your peace. Not the fake peace of pretending everything is fine, but the inner stillness that comes from doing the emotional work. You don't react impulsively. You don't seek validation. You don't create chaos. Your peace is magnetic. And to a man who hasn't found his own yet, it's both comforting and terrifying. What he encounters in you isn't just rarity, it's evolution. And that's why he can't forget you. One of the most confusing situations a woman can face is trying to figure out whether a man is genuinely intimidated by her or simply not interested. The behaviors can look similar on the surface: distance, hesitation, inconsistency, but the motivations behind them are completely different. Understanding that difference can save you from overthinking, self-blame, or misreading a dynamic that's not actually about you. When a man is uninterested, there's a certain flatness to his behavior. His energy doesn't fluctuate, it's consistently neutral. He doesn't lean in emotionally, but he also doesn't retreat dramatically. He simply doesn't invest. His messages feel cold or delayed, not because he's overwhelmed, but because he doesn't feel compelled to connect. There's no tension in his presence, no subtle spark, no internal struggle. He isn't debating anything internally. He's simply not choosing the connection. And while that can sting, it's usually the clearest answer. But when a man is intimidated, there's a very different emotional undertone. His energy doesn't disappear. It surges and collapses in waves. He might show genuine interest one moment and then withdraw the next, not because he's confused about you, but because he's conflicted within himself. You'll feel the tension, the nervousness, the awareness he has around you. There's a spark he tries to hide, a softness he tries to suppress. He's not indifferent, he's overwhelmed. An uninterested man doesn't care how he comes across. An intimidated man becomes hyper-aware of how he's showing up. Uninterested men don't overthink their responses. Intimidated men hesitate, rewrite messages, and worry about saying too much or too little. One is emotionally absent, the other is emotionally frightened. You can also see the truth in how he reacts to your standards. A man who isn't interested will walk away without resistance. A man who's intimidated will freeze, retreat, or get quiet, not because he wants to leave, but because he's unsure whether he can rise to what the connection demands. His fear isn't about losing freedom, it's about not feeling enough for someone like you. Ultimately, the difference comes down to emotional depth. Indifference feels empty. Intimidation feels unsettled. One leaves no imprint, the other creates tension you can feel even in silence. If his behavior feels charged, conflicted, or heavy with unspoken emotion, he's not uninterested. He's scared of how deeply you affect him. Staying empowered and magnetic isn't about trying to impress anyone or being someone you're not. It's about cultivating a presence that comes from your own authenticity, self-respect, and clarity of purpose. The energy that draws people in, that keeps men intrigued and even intimidated in the best way, is not something you manufacture. It's something you nurture from within by consistently showing up as your highest self with boundaries, confidence, and emotional awareness intact. First, staying empowered means knowing your worth and refusing to compromise it. You don't settle for half effort. You don't chase approval. and you don't sacrifice your peace to please someone else. Empowerment comes from the quiet confidence that you are complete on your own, and any connection should enhance your life rather than fill a void. When a man senses that level of self-sufficiency, he's drawn to you, not because of manipulation or strategy, but because the energy of someone who respects themselves is inherently magnetic. Being magnetic also means maintaining your interests, passions, and life outside of the relationship. You remain fully engaged with your personal goals, hobbies, and friendships. A woman who has depth beyond the romantic connection projects vitality and independence. That energy is irresistible. Men aren't drawn to emptiness. They are drawn to someone with layers, purpose, and an unwavering sense of self. Another key is emotional intelligence. Staying empowered means being aware of your feelings, processing them internally, and responding with clarity instead of reacting impulsively. You set standards calmly and consistently. You communicate directly, and you never compromise your boundaries to avoid discomfort. That emotional steadiness is a powerful form of attraction because it signals strength without aggression and presence without neediness. Finally, staying magnetic means embracing your natural energy, softness paired with strength, warmth paired with discernment, openness paired with self-protection. You don't dim your light to make someone feel comfortable. You shine fully, and that authenticity naturally filters out those who aren't ready to meet you at your level. Remaining magnetic isn't about chasing attention. It's about radiating confidence, maintaining your integrity, and living in alignment with who you truly are. When you consistently show up this way, men notice. They feel the pull of your energy, the unshakable foundation of your presence, and the quiet authority of your boundaries. And that combination, it's both empowering for you and unforgettable for anyone who crosses your path. The most important lesson to carry from this video is simple but powerful. Never dim your light for anyone. Your authenticity, your strength, your intelligence, and your emotional depth are not flaws to hide. They are your greatest assets. Too often, women feel pressured to soften themselves, to downplay their confidence, or to adjust their boundaries to make a man comfortable. But when you dim your light, you don't just compromise your power, you attract people who are comfortable with less, not with the fullness of who you are. True connection doesn't require you to shrink. It requires you to shine fully and unapologetically. Never dimming your light also means embracing every part of who you are. Your passions, your opinions, your ambitions, your quirks, they all contribute to the magnetic energy that makes you rare and unforgettable. Men who are intimidated by you are intimidated because they see the reflection of their own potential in your confidence. They feel the strength you embody and recognize that they can't take shortcuts around your standards. But rather than dulling your brilliance to make them comfortable, your light challenges them to grow, to rise, and to show up at their best. That challenge is not a threat. It's a test of alignment with someone who values themselves as much as you do. Another critical part of never dimming your light is protecting your boundaries while remaining open to genuine connection. When you clearly communicate your limits, honor your needs, and maintain your self-respect, you are not being rigid, you are being magnetic. Boundaries aren't walls, they're the framework that allows a man to see who you truly are and decide if he's capable of meeting you there. And if he can't, that's his limitation, not yours. Ultimately, shining your light is about consistency, self-trust, and courage. It's about refusing to apologize for your intelligence, your ambition, or your depth. It's about walking through the world fully embodied in your own power, knowing that the right people will be drawn to you, while the wrong people will be naturally filtered out. When you never dim your light, you don't just create attraction, you create respect, admiration, and genuine connection that lasts. Remember, the women who leave the most lasting impressions are not the ones who adjust to fit in. They are the ones who shine so brightly that the world has no choice but to notice. Keep your light blazing, always.